With a look at the rules for the upcoming softball season at Florida State University here in Intramural Sports, I'm Director of Intramurals, David Peters. Here to tell you where to go, how to check in, and also how to play our softball league. We'll talk about the differences between perhaps slow pitch softball you've played before and how we play here at Florida State University. All that coming up here in this rules presentation so that you can have your teammates and yourself ready to go for the upcoming softball season. Hey, here's what's coming up. As I mentioned, facility information, player check-in, those sport rules, and we'll talk a little bit about the league and how we play here, the season length, and so forth. You can know that everything we do in intramural sports is based off our 7 principles of intramurals: involvement, getting you out there to participate and have a good time, making sure things are fair, and sportsmanship too are some of the key things that we focus on here in intramural sports, and we hope that you'll enjoy your experience in softball this upcoming season as you are playing along with some of those different principles. Softball is played out at the Rec Sportsplex, our nice, relatively new facility on the southwest campus. We're on the west side. We have our softball diamonds, and there's a separate entrance there. The west entrance, you'll be able to enter there to park and come on down and get set to go for your games out at the Rec Sportsplex. Know that there's no alcohol, no tobacco, no pets, and no glass containers permitted out there, and we are a tobacco-free facility. That includes smoking and smokeless tobacco, so make sure that you remind your players to leave that at home. If you need maps or directions to the Rec Sportsplex, they are available right on our website at fsu.campusrec.com/im. If you've never been there, we recommend about 5 or 10 minutes to give yourself a chance to find it for the first time. Once you've made that drive a few times, it's almost automatic, but directions on our website will help you to get there. Now, player check-in for softball occurs out at the field house on the west side. So we have an east side where we play our football and our soccer. Separately is the west field house, which is located right in the middle of the 5 softball diamonds that we have. That's where you will check in for your softball game. Each one of your players needs their current valid FSU card to check in every game. So the first game, they'll come out, they'll be added to your roster at that time, and then every other game, we'll just check them in so that they're ready to go to play and head on out to the field. But make sure that everyone stops by the windows and checks in before they go to the fields to play. They need to do that just to make sure that we have everything squared away and make sure that enough players are properly registered for your team every night. Notice here in softball that you may play on 1 men's or women's team and then 1 co-rec team as well. So it's 2 softball teams, but 1 must be a co-rec team and 1 must be a men's and women's team if you're going to play on 2. So not men's and fraternity, that's not acceptable, again, because that wouldn't be a co-rec team there. And once you've signed in for a team, and this includes all of your teammates, they're stuck on that team for the whole season. We don't allow you to change for the softball season. Different sport down the way, they certainly can play with other friends, but once they've signed in once, they're on your team for the season. For more information about what our captains need to know, check our Team Captains podcast. It has player eligibility, talks about some of our player restrictions, such as softball club players and baseball club players. There's some restrictions on how many can be on your team. Forgotten ID pass, forfeits, defaults, and related fines, and also more about that regular season and our playoffs. All available in the Team Captains podcast. It's available separately on our website and also through the 7 principles of intramural sports, again, on the intramural website. Sportsmanship is a top priority for us in intramurals across all of our sports, softball as well, although I have to say that softball doesn't have too many sportsmanship problems. But if you notice that things are getting a bit too intense, please make sure that you remind your players on your team to make sure they display the appropriate amount of sportsmanship towards each other and towards the other team. We rate everyone on a scale of 0 to 4. You have to have a 3.0 average to make it into our playoffs, so make sure that your sportsmanship remains high. For more information on sportsmanship, a separate podcast is available, and it's available also on our website through our sportsmanship guidelines. It's one of the 7 principles of intramural sports. All right, that's some background, where to go, how to get checked in. Let's talk about how you play softball here, and we play 10 on 10 in our men's and women's leagues. You need 8 players to start a game. 6 players at game time is a default. 5 is a forfeit, and that's going to cost you some money. So make sure you have at least 6 people there to check in for your game. Again, players will be checked in. They got to be at the field, ready to go, properly equipped when game time comes around. We have a huge couple of clocks out at the field, so you know exactly what time it is, so you can make sure that you're at the appropriate field and ready to go at game time, so we can keep things moving along smoothly as we continue to play games back-to-back every hour all night long. We hate to get behind. Co-rec is also 10 on 10 in softball, and co-rec teams must have 4 players of each gender present to start the game. The legal combinations are 6 males and 6 females. So notice that makes 12, and we'll talk about extra hitters in a second, but that's a legal combination. Typically, if you're playing with 10, 5 and 5. You could also play with 9 players, 5 and 4, or 4 and 5. And you can play with 8 if you're desperate. That's okay too, and it's 4 males and 4 females. Again, as I mentioned, 6 players at game time results in a default. Also, 7 players at game time would be a default as well. 5 or less results in a forfeit, and we certainly, again, don't want that to happen. Player equipment, make sure you remind your players of a couple things they can't wear, and that includes wrist and hand jewelry. So Livestrong bracelets, rings, watches, that sort of stuff needs to come off. Visible rings, including wedding bands, I've already mentioned, also not permitted. It's just a safety requirement. Exposed jewelry, what we think is dangerous. So if you're wearing these huge hoop hoop earrings or maybe something that has some sort of sharp edges to it, we're going to ask that those also come out before the game happens. And it's just a safety consideration, and our intramural staff or our umpires will ask you or your players to do that. If not complying with that, unfortunately, the only penalty we have in softball is ejection. There's not a technical foul or a penalty flag that we can throw, so we don't want that to come down to that. So just as a helpful hint, remind your players of these particular rules before they come out. Shoes are also required out there at softball, so sandals, flip-flops are not allowed. Also, metal spikes and metal cleats are not allowed. Regular softball cleats that are non-metallic are absolutely fine, and most of our most competitive players particularly will wear those, but metal spikes and metal cleats are not allowed, and that is a safety issue for us. Again, if we find you with metal spikes or metal cleats, ejection, again, is the only penalty we have in softball, so we don't want it to come to that. So remind your players of that. In softball, our men's fraternity and co-rec leagues will all use a 12-inch size softball. For women's and sorority league play, we'll be using the 11-inch size softball. We encourage you to bring your own gloves from home, although we do have gloves, bats, and softballs available for checkout right there at the field house. So where you check in for your game, you would just request that for your players, and they'll just present their ID. We'll give them a glove for the hour, and they'll get their ID back when they bring the glove back or the bat or whatever they're checking out from us. We also have batting helmets available there and some catcher's masks in case some of your players would like to wear those. We always are going to encourage personal safety equipment, and it's available for checkout again right there at the West Fieldhouse check-in windows. Now, our bat rules vary by division. So take a look at this. Men's Division 1, 1AA, and co-rec Division 1. Our Division 1s, also women's, fraternity, and sorority, are ASA bat rules applied, so you can bring your own bats as long as they comply with ASA rules, and we'll talk about where you can go to see if it does comply or not in just a second. If you're playing in one of our Division 2 or Division 3 leagues, you're required to use our bats. So that's Men's Division 2, Men's Division 3, and also co-rec D2 and D3. Again, must use Florida State University bats. So if you have players on your team that are so intense that they've gone out and bought a $400 bat to use at softball, you must be playing one of our upper leagues to use that. We feel like our lower leagues, the Division 2 and Division 3 leagues, are more recreational, and so we don't want equipment that can cost a lot, particularly here in softball, to have an undue effect on that particular game. And we really want it to be level. So make sure that you sign up for the right division so that you can use equipment if you want to bring it or not bring it and just use ours. Now for our upper divisions, for Divisions 1 and 1AA, as I just mentioned, only regulation softball bats as determined by ASA, and there's the website, asasoftball.com, are legal. You can see that the stamp over there will be on the bat, and any standard baseball bat is illegal. Of course, the baseball bat would not have one of these ASA stamps. And regardless of stamp, the bat must not appear on the illegal bat list, which is currently published by the ASA. Again, that's right there on their website. So there are times where the ASA will stamp a bat and then later determine it's not eligible. So we want to make sure that you take your bat by the maker of the bat and the model of the bat. You'll be able to check the list to make sure it's okay. So this applies to Division 1 and 1AA. When we have illegal bats, we have certainly some harsh penalties for this. We put the onus on the offensive team or the team bringing the bat to make sure it's legal. So if you have a question about the bat, we encourage you to ask before the game. Check with a staff member, our supervisors, check with our umpires to make sure that the bat is okay so we can rule on that. Just don't go out there with the bat and try to use it. On the first offense, all runs by the offending team up to the point of discovery are vacated. So if it is 11-9 in the fourth inning and the team with 11 runs is using an illegal bat, we are wiping all 11 runs off the board. The bat is removed from play. The batter is called out, but we'll continue the game. So that is certainly a harsh penalty. We don't want that to happen. So come back, make sure it's legal before the game, and we won't have a problem in the 4th, 5th, or 6th when that bat turns up to be illegal at that time. If we have 2 bats that are illegal in the same game by the same team, the batter is ejected on that second offense and the game is forfeited to the opponent. Note that we consider the bat used as soon as someone steps into the batter's box and takes a pitch. Whether they swing at it or not, they're in there with the intent to use the bat, and that would be considered a use for the purposes of this rule. So again, ask our staff before the game and you'll stay out of trouble because we do not want to have to take runs off the board just because of an illegal bat. Note that if the score was 12-10, for example, in the 5th inning and we wiped all those runs off the board, the mercy rule would apply immediately, and so a 10-0 score or a 12-0 score, the other team would win and everyone would go home. So make sure, again, that we don't have this problem. And again, Divisions 1 and 1AA. Divisions 2 and 3 don't have to worry about this because you're using Florida State University bats, and we have already approved those for use in the season. Here is a basic diagram of what goes on out at the Rec Sportsplex for softball. You can see our 5 different fields here. They're both numbered and color-coded. So you may be on the green field, for example, which is the back field. It has a green scoreboard. It's got some green signage. The idea being that you should be able to also find it not by number, but by color. But warm-up has to occur when you're out there early in designated areas. We have a lot of open space around our field house, but we don't allow warm-up in here because no telling where that softball might fly. You may just have an errant throw. We do not want people getting hurt when they're walking to a field. So there's some area here in each alleyway play, plenty of it actually, for you to get in here and do some throwing. So if you get there early, we ask that warm-up occur beyond the dugout. Signage will indicate that. Our staff will probably point folks in the right direction, but just make sure you get your team down here, and we won't have too much of a problem with regards to overthrows or things of that nature. You can also warm up in the field of play right before your game, so if the previous game ends early, you certainly have time to get out there and warm up, but we'll keep things on time, so sometimes games finish so close to the top of the hour that we don't have time to get the next game started with some warm-up ahead of time, so you'll have to warm up outside the field and just be ready to get ready to play when game time comes around. All offensive players, including, except the batter, runners, on-deck hitter, and base coaches, must remain in the dugout behind the chain link fencing. Another safety issue. There is an on-deck area that is marked for batters, and offensive equipment can be left in this area in between innings, but it's clearly marked out there, so you'll see where that is supposed to be. We just don't have bats all over the place, and people are not allowed outside of the dugout when we have live play happening. So make sure that you remind your players again of that particular requirement. Safety first is what we're thinking about there in intramural sports and intramural softball. Our game length for every league is 7 innings or 50 minutes. And any inning which starts before the 50-minute limit will be completed. Of course, we will play extra innings in the playoffs as needed, but if we reach the 7-inning limit or the 50-minute limit, and we have clocks on our scoreboards to know how much time you have left, that will be the limit for regular season games. We have a 10-run rule. If a team is ahead by 10 or more runs after 4 complete innings, so as we head to the top of the 5th or heading to the bottom of the 4th, when the offensive team, the home team that is ahead, the game will be called. So that's the 10-run rule, and it applies both in the regular season and in the playoffs. Your lineups in men's and women's play can include an extra hitter. So I mentioned it's 10 on 10, but you can play with 11 people in the batting lineup, and that would be the maximum that we would allow. You have to declare that you're going to use that 11th hitter before the start of the game. If you only have 10 players and someone comes in late, you can't be added to the bottom to make an 11th hitter. They just become a sub at that point. But you can use 11 if you start with 11. And the EH can take any position in the field, but must remain in the same spot in the batting lineup. So it's almost like you have just 11 people to pick 10 fielders from every inning. In co-rec, the extra hitters are 2, one of each gender. So that means you have 12. I mentioned earlier you can have 6 males and 6 females. Well, this is why, because you can have 2 extra hitters in a co-rec game. As it says here, requires both of them. So you could not play with 11. And the same applies here. The extra hitters have to be known at the start of the game. You have to start with 12 players in your lineup and then continue on as normal. And same deal there. You can pick any 10 of those 12 people in the lineup to be out in the field with no problems whatsoever. Our co-rec lineups will alternate between males and females. It doesn't matter who starts first. You can have a female lead off, or you can have a male lead off, but after that, everyone will continue to rotate. I mentioned earlier that you can also play with 9 players in co-rec. Of course, that's an odd number, so that doesn't help very much with this rule. So here's what happens in that particular case. When you're playing with 9 players, you can either play with 8 and have a sub, and you don't have any problems with the lineup. It's always going to rotate, and you do not have to take any outs. If you want to play with 9 players in the batting lineup, that's also okay. You just take an out every time that 10th position comes around because there's no one to hit there, and it'd be like having 2 females hit back-to-back or 2 males hit back-to-back. That's not permitted. So that's how you would do it with 9. And many of our teams select with 8. If you had an extra player come in and make 10, you could add them down there to the bottom of the lineup. So for extra hitters, as I just mentioned, they have to know that you have an extra hitter before the game. But if you start with 9 players and a late person shows up to make 10, then they can go into the 10th spot, and we will add that 10th spot to the order. But we would never add the 11th or the 11th and 12th. I hope that makes some sense. Again, our umpires are there to help you out with that particular rule. You have to finish with 8 players. If players have to leave because of injury, disqualification, or ejection, there's no one available. You can still play, but if you drop below 8 players, then we will end the game at that particular point. When you have someone who has to leave and they are in the lineup, so started with 9, but now you have 8, we will record it out when that particular player comes around in the lineup. We offer limited free substitution in softball, and that just means that we like to have players come in and out as much as they want. So if you have a starter come in and play the first inning, you could have a sub play the second inning, and then a starter can go back in the third inning, and then the substitute can come back in the same position in the 4th inning, and so forth. So the idea here with limited substitution is that the subs play an entire 6 consecutive outs. So pretty much a top and a bottom of an inning, or a bottom and the top of the next inning, so that you're not just using some players in the field and then subbing in a completely different lineup to hit in the bottom half of the inning, or so forth. So again, got to play those 6, must re-enter in the same position in the batting lineup, and our umpires will help you out with that. You will keep your own score. You'll have the score sheet right there, and we just pass the score sheet back and forth in between teams every half inning. But our umpire will take a look at that and help with the substitution. So just notify our umpire if you're going to make one of those subs, and we will make sure it's clearly indicated on the score sheet. Pitching and slow pitch. Well, there's designated height for those pitches, so they don't come in too flat, they don't come in too high, and the arc of the pitch is between 6 and 12 feet. Our home plate umpires will make a determination on this to make sure that it has the appropriate height and also the appropriate speed, because it's slow to moderate. We're not whipping fastballs in there for slow pitch softball. And again, our umpires will make a designation. They may rule a pitch illegal if it does not fit in any of these different categories. An illegal pitch is an automatic ball unless it is swung at by the batter. In that case, whatever the result of the play is happens. Swing and miss would be a strike, but the batter does not have to swing at an illegal pitch, and our umpires will make that vocal at home plate. They will call illegal pitch as the ball is in the air, and then the batter can choose if they think it's awesome to swing at it or just to let it go, knowing that it's an automatic ball. The pitcher must start his or her motion with one foot touching the pitching rubber out there. The pitcher must pause while touching the rubber before each pitch, and the pitcher can step in any direction. We do have some pitchers that step up there and then actually step backwards as they deliver a pitch. That's fine. It's a little unique, but certainly is okay in our slow pitch softball rules. So keep this in mind as well for your pitchers out there. What about the hitters? Well, number one in intramural sports is that they start with a 1-ball, 1-strike count, which means you really only get 2 strikes before you're out of there. And this is maybe one that you want to remind your players, because we have oftentimes the case after 2 strikes, people don't know that they're out. Well, they are, because the count begins at 1-1 for every batter when they initially step into the batter's box. Foul balls on the 3rd strike are an out. So make sure that that doesn't happen. No bunting is allowed. Batters must take a full swing at the pitch. A bunt is a dead ball and an out, actually. So again, come up there swinging and make sure that you know how many balls and strikes are there. Our umpires will announce the count as necessary, but certainly starting with 1 ball and 1 strike is an important thing to know for newcomers in particular to intramural softball at Florida State. What about home runs? Well, there's no limit in any of our leagues in our spring season as long as we're playing traditional softball pitch. For those leagues that play 3-pitch, there's a separate podcast with regards to 3-pitch softball rules that also have to do with the pitching, and we do have a home run limit in 3-pitch. But in traditional softball, no home run limits, and that is for most of our spring leagues. The distance out there is 315 feet to left, center, and right field, so it's quite a distance. So we don't have too many home runs hit already because the distance is just so far. Fielding and running. Well, to make a play on the ball, the fielder has the right to any part of the field, and that includes the base path. So if there's a pop-up that's in the first base path, the batter must run around the fielder making the play, so they can actually run outside of their lane if the player is there trying to get under a fly ball, for example. Also note that there is no trucking. What is trucking? That is just running over someone, whether that is at home plate like you've seen in a Major League Baseball game or at second base or wherever. We do not permit this as a safety guideline. Runners must slide or somebody just give up. You don't have to slide. You can just jog in to be tagged at any base, and this includes home plate. Trucking results in ejection, and it's a serious offense because it's a safety concern. So for those ultra-competitive leagues with maybe some of your players very intense, remind them that this is not permitted in our particular league, running over someone. A courtesy runner may be used in the event of an injury and upon the agreement of the opposing team captain. So it takes both of these requirements in order to use a courtesy runner. The courtesy runner must be the player of the same gender in correct, or obviously just the last player in men's or women's to record an out. That's how we would select that particular courtesy runner to run out onto the field to take the place of an injured player to run around the bases. Overthrows, just as a quick note, any overthrow that lands out of play the award is determined by the time that the thrower released the ball for the throw, not when it goes out of play. There's a difference there. So if the shortstop, for example, fields a ground ball and throws it out of play over the first baseman's head, the award is typically first base and second base because the runner going to first base, the batter, hasn't reached first base yet by the time the shortstop has picked up the ball and thrown it. So the ball's already in the air before he touches first base. So therefore, the 2 bases that runner would get are first and second. Complex is what I can say about those softball rules with a variety of different situations. We've got the extensive NERSA rulebook that we use for softball. It'll be out there for any of these particular situations that might be a bit odd, but this is one that comes up quite often. A maximum of 6 players, including the pitcher and catcher, are permitted in the infield. A maximum of 4 players out in the outfield. Everyone has to have a catcher. Here are the standard fielder positions. For co-rec, 2 males and 2 females are allowed in the infield. There's no restriction on actual position. So we've just done a sample here, but you could have both males over here on the left side of the infield and both females on the right side. That would be fine, or you can see what we've done out here in the outfield. Pitcher and catcher, however, have to be of opposite genders. So a male pitcher, we would then have behind the plate a female fielding the catcher's position. Co-reg modifications. To talk about those real fast because we have a lot of co-reg teams. So there's just really 2 key things to know about co-reg and how it's different from standard men's and women's play. First of all, walks. At all times when a male player is walked, he is awarded second base, and the runners on base at that time are forced over to the next base only if they're forced. So not all runners on base get 2 bases. So if you had a runner on second, for example, and a male player walked, that runner at second would just be forced over to third. He does not get home, but the person who was walked, who was a male player, would go all the way to second base. Now that's not directly to second base, must touch first base first as you jog on out to second base for male players. When a female player is walked, she is awarded only first base. So the idea here being is that you don't want to walk, for example, a male player just to get to a female player. So the penalty is that the male player will get 2 bases in that particular case. Now with 0 or 1 out following a male walk, the female must hit. There's no option there. So if the male goes down to second base, then our females are just going to grab a bat and step into the batter's box and be ready to hit. However, with 2 outs following a male walk, a female may opt to hit, step into the batter's box and go for it, or they can just let the umpire know that they'd like to take a walk, and they just come on in, drop their bat, and jog on down to first base, and the next male hitter would step into the plate. So these are the choices that are available to female batters when a walk is issued to the male player that precedes them in the lineup. 0 or 1 outs is one way. The female has to hit. 2 outs requires that our females hit in that particular case. And those, along with the alternating order, are some of the differences that we have in our co-rec leagues for traditional softball here in intramural sports. Whew, that is it. Those are some of the variations. Some of the things that may not be variations, just some reminders we wanted to give you. And we want you to know this so that you can take our team captain's exam. So if you're the team captain, make sure you do that. Finalize your team registration by taking the team captain's exam by the required deadline. You can see the deadline, also learn how to take the exam, get registered for that, all on our website, but there's certainly a deadline to do that, so we encourage team captains to get right on that so you can keep your registration in our upcoming league. It will rain on occasion throughout our softball season. How do you know if your games are rained out? Well, 2 different ways. First off, you can check our website where you will go to learn more about your schedules. And right on our front page of Intramural Sports, you can see this box right here, which talks about if we are open or not. All facilities open as it notes for this particular day, but if we had rained out something, it might say Rec Sportsplex closed, softball rained out, something like that. It's going to be right here on our website, so you can just cruise over there. We tend to make rain out decisions late in the afternoon. We like to wait as long as we can before we call off games because many of you are ready to come out and play in that particular evening. So usually after 5 o'clock, you'll want to check here for that information. Or if you're away from your computer and just want to dial up the Intramural Sports rain line, you can do that as well. It's at 850-645-RAIN. That's 850-645-7246. We update that rain line and our website almost simultaneously when we make a decision. Light showers in the afternoon will not cancel activities usually. However, we will be canceling if we have a huge rainstorm. We also watch lightning very closely out there with all of our sports, but our lightning detection system, which is there at the facility, will help us know if we need to pull you off the field because of lightning. So we're monitoring weather conditions all the time, again, to make sure that you are safe. Note the regular season games that are rained out are generally not rescheduled, but if we do rain out the playoffs, well, we've got to keep those going. So teams are encouraged to check online, their responsibility to see if we have rained out your playoff game and to see when that's rescheduled for, because sometimes it's a very quick turnaround. So make sure you go online to check that information. It's all right there at fsu.campusrec.com/IM. Also our team captain's guide, those schedules, playoff draw meeting information, and more rules about softball, all right there on our website. A reminder that all of our teams in our softball league advance to the playoffs, all of them. 4-0, 0-4, doesn't matter your talent level, as long as you have the right sportsmanship, you have that 3.0 average, we're going to put you in. So make sure you check for your playoff game and not know, because everyone's going to make it. Don't forget to go to that. We hate for you to forfeit out because of missing that particular game. And that's softball. If you have questions, if you have concerns, certainly send us an email or drop us a phone call at 850-644-2430. We'll be glad to help you out before the season, or certainly see our staff in our office or at the Rec Sportsplex. We'll try to give you a hand and answer your questions when they come up. For Intramural Sports at Florida State University, I'm Director of Intramural Sports, David Peters. Good luck and have fun this upcoming intramural softball season.